How do you build a high-performing culture? This is Culture Architects. Candid conversations with extraordinary leaders sharing their biggest successes, failures, and lessons learned on their culture journeys. Here's David J. Friedman.
Welcome back to my conversation with Brian Roers, the co-founder and owner of Roers Companies. Last time, Brian shared his journey from being a CPA to putting up a real estate firm with his brother Kent, and he shared their different methods for teaching their organization's culture on a day-to-day basis. In today's episode, we're going to pick up where we left off on the tools that they use for determining and hiring for a culture fit. When you are hiring people, you mentioned you use the culture index. Are there other tools you use to figure out who's going to be a good fit for your culture? Who's going to work here?
You know, one of the ones that I use, we had a phrase we picked up years ago. We love people that are hungry, humble, and smart.
Mm-hmm.
We're like, that's really what we're looking for. It really summarizes it. So, I mean, the culture index is the biggest tool for us to really tell who people are. And it's very, very accurate. We've very rarely seen it not be correct or spot on. And so that's a big one. Trying to think, like, we get histories of people, you know, we'll try to do scenario analysis.
Mm-hmm.
We've had times when we've had people do projects saying, hey, you know, if you're going to do this role for us, we'd like to see how you would treat this project or how you would do this, you know, kind of a pre-work up ahead of it. And then really just ingraining them in the culture. You know, I mean, the biggest part for us, more so than the time period before we pick them, is after we pick up. You know, I mean, the last thing you want to do is hire somebody and then you run away and all they see is the HR department, you know. So we try to be really, you know, when somebody starts with us the first day, Kent and I or our leadership team try to meet them and say hello to them, get to know them more as an individual. I mean, I say stupid laws, right? I can't ask people any personal questions on the interview, but once they're working with us, we want to know who their families are. And we want to know where they have kids, how far they're driving to work, what do they do for fun? I mean, that's what's really a fun being a part of it. And so, and then you get into that onboarding part where we're bringing them in. You know, normally they come in for a day, whether it's virtual or they're here, but they're going through our values. They're going through that EOS system. They're going through the blueprints, the culture indexes and all of that. And so that's the part we really, I would say, focus on almost more so than that pre-board. But once they're on board, how are we getting up to speed as fast as we can? Because we know that's how they're going to be a team member. And that's when you build that retention into somebody that's going to be here long term.
Yeah. So when you've now spread into 14 different states, is that right?
Yes. Well, we're in 14 different states. We're very focused in probably 6.
Okay.
So I don't want it to sound more than it is, but it's really, we're very focused in 6 different markets across the U.S. And so we do have a spread out team. I'm assuming that's where you're going.
Yeah, and that's where I was going. That what are some of the challenges that has created for maintaining your culture when you're that distributed?
Yeah, so I would say it's put some of our team on the road more than I'd like. So we are trying to be on the sites as much as we can. And so our leaders tend to carry that torch. And so they're flying to, you know, to our different offices in Texas, Florida, Arizona. They're getting to the sites in the Carolinas, in Utah, in addition to the other markets. And so it's really putting people on site as much as we can to get that, and then really hiring and bringing on the team in that right manner, you know, and that's what's really back to. So when we hire, you know, what we want is we want to have our influence from Minnesota, but in Texas, we want local people there. We want people that are in that community that have relationships with the community. And so that means we really have to crank up our side of getting that culture into that office because we're bringing people on from other organizations.
Yeah.
And the other big challenge, as you know, and I'm sure where you're going next is with growth becomes, you know, we have time periods that we'll ask people, raise your hand if you've been here for a year. And half the room raises their hand. And why? That's because that's how fast we've grown. Yeah. And so with that, you have to be very vocal, very persistent on really being on what the culture is, what the values are, to making sure, because half the company's new. And so you really want to get them up to speed as fast, which is why, again, you know, the tools, the passion and the training, as well as the onboarding. And those are probably the biggest things that really get that nationwide, as well as the growth and as new as everybody is.
Yeah. So what's the biggest, I'm going to call it a mistake, and I will I'll frame that by saying I totally get, and we all do, that, well, we learn from experiences. So some things don't go well and you learn, you get smarter as you go. But somewhere along the lines, I'm sure you've made a mistake or two that you said, oh man, what was I thinking? And in retrospect, it's like, that was such an obvious thing. I don't know what I was thinking, but now I'm a lot smarter from that. Like what, and specifically around building your culture, like what are some of the biggest faux pas or mistakes you made that you learned from?
I think the two, we referenced that time period where we really kind of retooled everything back in 2017. And that was where I always called that, firm mistake number two. And that was just, we didn't bring the team with us. And so, and that's where through the growth since then, we've been very intentional about making sure we're bringing the team with us and what we're getting from that. So that's what I would argue from the culture perspective is really that time frame. I can share with you other business mistakes that led to it. I think the other one was we rolled out that tool, the OCAI, to really study and understand what our culture was. We got kind of wide with it at first, and you had referenced it earlier even, but we had more people weighing in on it. And we found we really needed, Kent and I really needed to lead that standpoint of what we saw from the culture. Now, we did feel good about including the senior leadership team in that process, of letting us set the vision and then really kind of, in a sense, being part of the mission of it, of fine tuning it, tweaking it. And then we rolled that out to the greater team. We had buy-in from that team where we're going with it. So I would say sometimes you wide things out a little bit too wide, where you really got to be loud, set that culture, set that tone off the top of what you're looking for. So those would be the two I would probably list off. When
you, on the first of those, you talked about you hadn't really brought the team with you and you're much better now about doing that. Describe more, what does that mean? What does it mean to bring the team with you, or what does it mean for the team not to be brought with you?
Yeah. So probably a couple real simple ones. Making sure you're hiring for where your growth and where you're going. We had continued to hire a group that was probably geared for a 20 to 30 person company at the time. And so again, great, to your point earlier, great people, right? They did really good in that, those mid-sized companies that weren't hugely growth. We always joke, we had somebody that we brought on board, and she had previously worked at a scope company, right? And we always joke, the scope, even on, different mechanisms is the same one that they were using back in the days. The scope was on a ship, right? And so, she just, again, great person, didn't love change. And so as we kept changing things and things kept moving, they just don't succeed and they don't perform. And that's, again, it's not their fault. It's just what the company does to them. So it's really having the right team that's where you're going as a company, not where you're at today. That's the thing. And then training them up, we had a time period here just recently where we've spent, training on, I mentioned the leadership training that we do, and we truly spend, it's probably $1 million a year between payroll time that goes into it, the leaders that we have in there, my time, but of our time of leadership training. And so then we have time periods like we have, right now, right, where we're in a really interesting real estate market. We've seen a little bit of slowdown. We're seeing a huge growth spurt in the next 6 to 12 months. And so we have to have the team on board. And so we're going back to those leaders and saying, hey, we've seen some transition. We've seen some time. Now is the time when we need that investment we put into you as leaders.
Step it up.
We need you to get these teams going. We need everybody to be performing at the next level, not at the level we're at today. And that's been really fun to watch because they truly are doing it. They're truly stepping in. And we're seeing almost that return on investment, so to speak, the investment we've made in our team.
Right. There's something that there's a phrase that I've heard people say often, and I have a different twist on this phrase. And so I want to ask you about this. So you will often hear people say that, you're only as good as your people. And it sounds like a great thing. And my perspective on that is slightly different. And my perspective is you're only as good as your people perform. Because my contention is that the exact same people will perform differently in different organizations. In other words, if you take your 400 people and you put them somewhere other than your company and you put them in a different environment and a different culture, those exact same people would perform differently because the culture influences how the vast majority of them perform. I'm curious about your perspective on that. Does the culture change how those people perform? Would those people perform differently in your culture than somewhere else?
I think absolutely. I guess I like your variation on it of you're as good as your team performance. And we're very bold about that. I mean, we have the highest performing team. We know we invest a lot into them and they succeed. I mean, they're pulling through in all markets. And we tell them that, like, so somebody who starts with us, they know we're going to push for performance. I mean, I have my joke inside my office. I'm like, no one's ever come in my office and said, hey, I'm bored. I'm not feeling like I'm pushed enough. People come in and say, hey, okay, how hard can we push? Like, A, we never thought it was imaginable that we could accomplish this. And guess what? We did. But B, are you sure we can get to there? Like, and I'm like, that's when you really step up. But we tell teams, like, look, we're going to push you harder than you've ever been pushed before because we know you can do it. And when you do it, the accomplishment you're going to feel is similar to what we're feeling every day. I mean, I come in this office every day. I'm so proud. I'm so amazed by what we've accomplished that, you know, and you can't not look at the teams and say that's what we've done, but it's because of how we've brought on the team, who we brought on, and how we encourage, motivate, train, teach them, do everything we do, because otherwise we wouldn't be where we're at. And that's the part where you go, you're only as good as your team. But I always love, Bill Gates had a statement that he made, and he said, people usually overestimate what they can accomplish in the short term, but they underestimate what they can accomplish in the long term.
That
and
makes sense.
We see it day in day. Our teams are so high achieving that we get to our quarterly rocks, right? I'm always back at people. I'm like, we're going to get this done and this done and this done. Like, okay, guys, you're only one person I really appreciate, but I'm always pulling people back when they set their goals. But I can tell you, like our firm, right? We set a goal in 2017 to be at a certain point by 2025, by the end of 2025. We nailed it by early 2023, almost 3 years early. And so again, do we overestimate every quarter? We think we can do more. And we look back and I'm like, we accomplished way more than I ever dreamed or imagined. Yeah. That's how we try to train the team, bring them on, make sure they're seeing that, but you know, just keep moderating that.
Yeah. You know, one of the, when I talk about the team being the company performing only as good as the staff performs, I think about, and I often talk about this in my talks, there's an analogy that I use often that I talk about public high school sports dynasties, because they're really interesting to me. They're everywhere around the country. And if you think about it, in a public school, you don't get to pick your people because it's a public school, and you turn over your roster every single year. And yet you have teams that have been winning for 10 or 15 or 20 years because I contend they've built championship cultures, that students come into that team and they realize there's a standard here to be upheld, and it causes them to elevate their performance. And I think it's just such a good analogy to what happens in a company. So have you had personal experiences? It could have been athletics, it could have been music, could have been the military, other places outside of business where you perhaps had the experience of being on a really high level program, a championship kind of a team.
Wow. I mean, I've seen it, you know, obviously. So I went to St. John's, where we had a football program out there that our coach is the winningest coach in college history. Wow. Our program has won multiple national title games. Yep. It's a 2,000 kid school in central Minnesota that's out there playing teams. And so what you saw there is that it starts with the coach, right? It starts with the leaders, and then it's a whole program. And, you know, like I compare it, you know, again, I guess I suppose the other one you could use, my kids, right? You touched the chord that I have student athletes. And so I have 4 boys, all 4 play hockey, all 4 of them play lacrosse. But what you see in these programs is it's top to bottom though, right? It's the high school coach that's coaching the high school team, but he's also talking to the youth coaches who are getting systems down. And, you know, where I'm a part of it, I'm just a measly youth coach. But I sit on, you know, some of the boards and the coach, but you just see when you could ingrain that whole culture into that organization, that town, and it starts from day one, you know, when they're back having fun in 2nd and 3rd grade, but you're teaching them the same methods and the same methodologies, and then you're treating them the same. And I think that's just such a part of it as they come up through those systems. I mean, like, you know, going back to the example of the college I went to, you know, they didn't hit in practice. And so it was a culture of, we're going to take care of you. You're a part of the team. We don't want to abuse you at practice. We don't want to abuse each other. Let's go abuse the other team. but let's save that up for Saturday. And so that was one of the neat things that they did. But it just, again, you're always taking care of the team. And I think that's what builds it, but it's such hard work, top to bottom. It takes countless hours and extra efforts that you got to put it in, and that's when you get it.
Yeah, I mean, I think about who knows whether hitting during practice is a good or bad thing, but regardless of whether it's a good or bad thing, the point is there's a way we do things on this team.
Yeah,
and championship teams, and it's true whether it's a sports team or whether it's a choral group or it's a dance troupe or it's a debate team or anything else. There's a way we do things on this team, and there's a standard that we have for how we're going to do it. If you're in a great choral group, I guarantee every one of those has a conductor that says there's a way we do things in this group. And they prescribe that, and they teach it, and they coach it. And if that doesn't work for you, you should probably be in a different choral group, because this is the way we do it here. And it's that kind of a standard, in my experience, that changes the game for people. And I think you've done it in your company, and I've done it in mine, and seen thousands of others, where when you create that kind of a standard in a very systematic and intentional way, people come into it, and even unconsciously, some of it's conscious, some of it's unconscious, they come in and they know there's a standard at the Roers company. There's a way we do things here. And they want to elevate their performance beyond what they would somewhere else. And I would be willing to bet that many of your staff, you've gone through it sounds like a very thorough process to pick good people. But I would be willing to bet that those same people perform at a higher level simply because of the standard that's been set in your company than they would perform if they worked in some other construction company or real estate development company.
Absolutely. No, I mean, it's actually rare that we put all the systems in place to I would say, create accountability. We tell people ahead of time, like, this is what we do. Like, if you're going to come in here as a salesperson, we log all of our calls, we count all of our stuff. That's just what we do. It's rare that we have to push somebody to accomplish it. The normalcy is that you're like backing people off and checking to make sure that they're not overboiling. And truly, like, every one of my check-ins I started off with, how are you doing? Like, what's going on in your life? Like, how's the job treating you? Like, I want to make sure we're accomplishing your goals, your career aspirations, what you want to do. Because we do really feel like we owe it to our team. I mean, that's part of, one of the things, growth, we did learn a couple of years ago. What does growth do? Growth puts opportunities in front of the team. I mean, candid with you, I don't need more opportunity. We've got plenty of real estate. We're truly doing it because we want to put opportunities in front of our team. And if we see, if we don't keep growing, it's harder to do that. This is the way we know how to do it. And so we keep growing, we keep putting opportunities in front of teams, but that's normally what I have to do is like, hey, take a breath, right? Go home. You're done great. You're probably expecting too much out of yourself, because that's the kind of people that we hire, are the people that expect more than they know they can accomplish. And so, but that's been really fun to see. And that's, again, that's what kind of feeds the growth, is when you're doing it for somebody else. It really is what feeds it.
You mentioned, coming from farms in Minnesota, and sort of this is what I'm interpreting to be a kind of Midwestern work ethic type of mentality. I'm curious, as you have gone into other states, if they're not in the Midwest, do you see the same kind of, I mean, you can always find good people, but do you think from your perspective, there's a higher probability of people with that kind of farm mentality, work ethic in the Midwest than other places?
I mean, it's hard. I guess it's hard to comment on if it's so, because I mean, I think it exists everywhere. I just think it's a slender group of people wherever you're at, One of the, I always to comment on your ag roots, I remember growing up, and farmers grew the corn, right? We had corn out in the field, and it was going to rain the next day, and we had to get our year's income in. And I'm like, there was no question, right? We just hauled all night long, and we worked all night. And so I tell that story to people because I'm like, look, if the project has to be done and the investor needs it, or the project needs it, or the building needs it, like, we just stay here till we get it done. Like, that's what has to happen. And so we just try to keep that culture going of how we were raised and brought up. And we have been able to put that in all of the different markets. It's not easy. It takes a lot. And you have to have a team that really wants it. But when you find that team that really wants it and they feel good about that too, that's what's given us the work ethic that we have on this team. And it truly is an incredible work ethic. I mean, our team work harder, they play harder. I mean, that used to be our value, was work hard, play hard. We simplified it to just work ethic. But our teams work hard, they play hard, they do life. And that's what's what seeing.
So one of the questions that I hear often from leaders in the talks that I do is they'll ask me about the ROI, the return on investment on work on culture. And I know, and it's just ridiculously obvious. I mean, it's pretty obvious that if you've got a highly motivated, engaged group of people that care about what they're doing, they're passionate about what they're doing, they're going to do whatever they do better and whatever their role happens to be. And that's going to drive the success of the company. I don't know how you could not see that.
Yep.
Yet, having seen that, there are some, you were a numbers guy who want to know, well, what are the numbers? What are the, how do you measure that? How do you know that it's really having that impact? I don't have to have a need for that, but there are an awful lot who do. I'm sure you get that question sometimes. So how do you know, or do you care? Maybe you don't even care. But what's your thought on how do we measure the impact of this stuff?
Yeah, the way we've done, or one of the ways I do, is we really look into, the awards we've won. I go to these. I don't need an award for my sake. I don't need an award for what I've done, but it's when you're winning the Top Workplaces award because of the engagement, or because of the survey our team filled out. We win Developer of the Year 2 years ago, Property Manager of the Year in Minnesota 2 years in a row. We were the largest developer. We put the most square footage in the ground in Minnesota last year. We were number 8 in Austin, Texas. When you're winning these awards, and it's because of the team, right? Like, and I guess if you want to quantify it, if you go look at my my payroll expense is the number one expense we have. And I don't know the exact number today, because back to your point, I don't really care because it doesn't matter. But at one time, our payroll was like 49% of our total spend. What does that tell you? Our biggest investment is in our people. And then when you go to the results we're getting are astronomical. They're out of this world, and people recognize it. People are seeing it, both from the Top Workplaces, people love being here, and to the fiscal financial ones of who's built the most, who's done the most. I think we were I don't even know, because the numbers were 12 on the multifamily builders, number 20 general contractor in the multifamily builders. And we've been around, we've been around for 12 years. And so, and then I go one step farther. You talk about a lot of legacy companies and how they treat their teams and how they do it. And that's why when we see these awards, we're so honored to be a part of that group, because you're up there with third generation companies, legacy companies that they know it's their people, and they're the ones that put those emphasis in there. And so that's what really, really matters, is when you're in that group of people, you're winning those awards, and truly the awards are to the team. I went last Thursday night, we had another group, and I'm like, look, I don't need to be here for me, but I want the team to know that they earned this award. They won this because they're putting the efforts in. Yeah.
So as we come to the conclusion of our conversation, which has been fascinating, I'm always interested for everybody about, and I asked about this a little bit before, but I'm always interested in kind of lessons learned. And I always think, we get to a certain age, a certain level of experience, and hopefully, and for most of us, we've accumulated some level of wisdom about what we do. And so if you were talking to the 22-year-old Brian Roers, who's just getting out of school and thinking about what's next for him, and probably had some picture of the world that may not have been all that accurate, what's the biggest piece of wisdom you would share with the 22-year-old Brian Roers?
I think it took us a while to figure out that we really needed to spend the money on the right people. And I think I've talked about the 2017. If we would have invested more earlier on, I think it would have come back stronger, faster. So I would say to Brian Roers, invest more. I think the other one is sometimes, you're trying to protect your team so much that if you were more transparent on the process, I think the team gets it. And the part that I probably missed is they get to learn from it too. And so just example, you talk about the leader where you're channeling away and you're trying to get him in a spot and things aren't aligned. If you're more transparent with the team about what happened, how it went, I think they get to learn that lesson as well. And so we sometimes bucket it into protecting them, or, we've got to be this, hero out there. If you're just transparent and real with them and like, this is what happened, we missed it, should have been better on it. We're better now. So I think those would be the two things I would really say.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation, Brian. I really appreciate you joining us. If people want to learn more about your company, where would they go to learn more?
Yeah, www.roerscompanies.com. We're there. Any Google search should be able to find us. Let's see, we're headquartered in Minneapolis. Anywhere about Roers is ROERS. Not
Great.
quite like the lion roars, but so that's how we spell Roers. So ROERS at roerscompanies.com.
I will share that in the show notes as well for people. Thank you, Brian. I really appreciate you joining us. Fascinating story. Congratulations on all you've accomplished too.
You bet. Thanks so much, David. It was great. Super fun to share the story and just to share our team and share a little bit of our people's success with the world.
That's great. And that's it for today's episode of Culture Architects with Brian Roers, co-founder and owner of Roers Companies. Folks, if you've been enjoying what we do on this show, make sure you subscribe, and that way you'll get automatic updates every time we drop a new episode. If you have a minute, I'd love it if you'd leave us a review, and that way more culture fans like you can discover the show. And lastly, if you want to know more about building a high-performing culture in your team or organization, check us out at CultureWise.com. See you next time on Culture Architects.
This has been Culture Architects with David J. Friedman. Join us next time for more insights and wisdom from great leaders in all walks of life. To book David for your next event or to learn more about his writing, speaking, or consulting, go to davidjfriedman.com. Culture Architects with David J. Friedman is a production of CultureWise.